College football's what ifs. It's an endless list. It's like a scroll that I could just unroll, and it goes all the way down Broadway here in Nashville of things that could happen this year and what would stem from those things happening. And we've got 4 of them that I just want you to entertain tonight to varying degrees of likelihood, but let's just have fun for a second. We've got a hierarchy in every conference. The SEC is no different. Georgia's got the highest win total down there. You got Bama is up there. LSU's got 9.5. Tennessee 9. Over/under win totals is what I'm talking about. But Chad came up in the Twitter mentions today and said, "What if Bama, Georgia, LSU, and Tennessee are all 10-2 in the regular season? Does the SEC champ still make the playoffs?" So what if we have the car wreck scenario? What if we just have the total cannibalism scenario down in the SEC? Is it likely? No. But think about the what if factor here. If everyone was no better than 10-2, you would have a test of history, because we've never had a college football playoff without at least one SEC team. But we've also never had a 2-loss team in the college football playoff, so something would have to give there. Now, I imagine if this were to go down, it would be really chaotic. It would be like 2007 levels of chaotic come Selection Sunday. You don't believe it's possible. Really, I don't truly believe it's possible either. I guess technically it's possible, but this is fantasy land. This is pure hypothetical land over here. So, put your unicorn horn in your forehead and just guess along it to what that world would feel like. Conference championship Saturday. Everyone's already got 2 losses in the SEC. Their highest ranked team is like number 5. How wild would that be? You're used to the second or sometimes the third SEC team being ranked in the top 10. What if just one of them is struggling to be up there? And then think about the strength of schedule argument that would stem. Nick Saban was just talking about this. We've talked about it a lot on the show. It would be a lot of what is 10-2 in the SEC equal to in the Pac-12 or in the ACC. It would be ugly. The knives would be out. Here's another good one. What if Cade Klubnik underperforms for Clemson? That's from Andrew. What if Cade Klubnik is more the Tennessee version of himself and not the UNC version of himself? Those are just games that he started last year. Well, I'll tell you what would happen. Potentially some early ACC chaos would happen. There's a lot of attention on that FSU-LSU game to start the year. It's not the most loaded week 1 schedule, but there's attention on Florida-Utah, and that's a Thursday night game, I think. There's not a lot of attention on the Monday night game, which is Clemson at Duke. Those of you out there who don't regularly pay attention to point spreads, but you know how good Clemson usually is, you know how good you think Duke is. Factor in home field advantage. What do you think the spread on that game is? Clemson at Duke to start the season. 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. Clemson's favored by 12. Very losable game. And if Cade Klubnik does not perform up to expectation, they can lose. To put a finer point on it, they can lose outright to Duke in week 1. That's the what if. That's the big kind of needle embedded within that what if. It's not that they could get caught against FSU. No, if Cade Klubnik at quarterback and Garrett Riley, the new OC there, if they just don't click, if it's like Josh Gaddis and Tyler Van Dyke at Miami last year, they can get beat by Duke. And that's number 1, because Duke is a good football team. And number 2, if that were to be the case, Duke could have the edge at quarterback with Riley Leonard. Some would argue they do anyway. I don't know that I would go that far because I know the upside of Cade Klubnik. But yeah, Duke is not to be trifled with in week 1. Don't go in there and trifle. I tell Bradley that all the time. I'm going to tell Clemson that. Don't go in there and trifle. Next up, this one's kind of nebulous. But Dylan hit us and said, what if we have the greatest season ever only to watch it and then just blow the whole thing up? I was disgusted the other day when I saw someone who shan't be named pop in someone else's mentions on that platform, and they were asking possibly the most ridiculous question in the history of humanity. Think about that. The question was, Do you just feel like looking over 2023? Is it a lame duck year? Because we've got the new playoff format in 2024. That is a full-on go sit by the garbage and think about things for a little while standpoint to come at anyone from. That is horrific. It's one of the worst takes imaginable. No is the answer. No. It's not a lame duck anything. In fact, 2024 could be lamer than 2023, depending on your perspective. But regardless of your perspective, 2023 is going to be every bit as good as any other year. But Dylan's saying, what if it's a great year? So what if it has all kind of twists and turns? What if it has a lot of late season drama? You got your usual upsets baked into the cake. I imagine myself in November. I'm not in a hurry to get there, but I imagine myself in November, and I imagine seeing a lot of the following phrases. Take a given scenario, take a given game, someone wins, someone loses. There'll be a lot of, well, if this were 2024, fill in the blank. So there's going to be a lot of the same thing you saw last year. When they announced they were going to expand the playoff, the first thing every media company out there, including ours, did was release a graphic. What this year's field would have looked like if the expanded playoff were already here. Well, you'll have the same logic thrown at you week after week. Not on this show necessarily, but week after week, you're going to be told, all right, Texas just lost to Alabama. Alabama just lost to Texas. Ohio State beat Wisconsin or lost to Wisconsin. Here's what it would mean next year, but here's what it means this year instead. Don't care, because next year doesn't matter until next year. But what if we do have a great season? I don't think it's going to make anyone feel any different, and it doesn't matter if you feel different, because the sport's headed where it's headed regardless of whether you and I like it or not. But I told you I think about myself this November. Imagine yourself in November of 2040. And at that point, you're talking to a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, and you're telling them about what college football used to be like. And there's some 3-loss team squeaking by in week 11, and they're saying, oh, it's okay, Dad. They're still in the playoff. They got 24 teams in this thing. They're still in the playoff. And you look at little Johnny and you say, little Johnny, once upon a Saturday, it wasn't like that. Once upon a Saturday, you couldn't afford to lose games. And especially a second or a third game would be unconscionable. You're headed to the Outback Bowl, and you're happy to be in the Outback Bowl. But you're not going to a playoff. Once upon a Saturday, that's the way it was. Well, you got one more year of that. And lastly, in the what if category, what if a team outside the top 10 wins it all? That's what Blake wants to know. By our estimation, the longest shot to ever win the national championship in the playoff era was Ohio State 2014. And that was, it looks like roughly the 13th or 14th best odds in the preseason. That surprises me a little bit. But be that as it may, every other one of these teams was top 10. Most of them were top 5 preseason, which is basically to say this rarely happens. Outside the top 10 in the preseason odds, Colin, can you show me the current preseason odds to win the national championship? Okay, so actually freeze on this. So if you're listening on podcast, Colin did one better. He didn't put up the top 10. He put up 11 through 22. So this is the group you would have to choose from. If you are to have this prediction verify, you would need Notre Dame or Oregon or Utah or Wisconsin, Auburn, A&M. I should have just gone in order. Tennessee is there. Kansas State's there. Ole Miss, Oregon State. You'll need one of them, not to make the playoff, to win the national championship. It certainly, if it happened, would provide fuel to both the expansionist crowd and the non-expansionist crowd. Here's what it would sound like. If Utah goes and wins a national championship, the expansionist crowd would say, see, we always told you one of these underdogs was capable of it. Now in this new world, this will happen more and more. The non-expansionist, me, who will be right if Utah wins the national championship, will say, you're watching the last year where this will ever be possible. Because it is possible for Utah to win the Pac-12, and then they go to the playoff, and they do exactly what TCU did to Michigan last year, only Georgia's not waiting for them. Just a better matchup is waiting for them because it's a small field. So who knows what happened in the regular season? No 3-loss teams in the playoff. So there is a needle that they could thread and they could win it. A smaller field, a smaller playoff, actually gives your proverbial underdog a better statistical shot at winning a title. In the future era, Utah will go and have to win 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 games, at least 3 games. And it's less likely to happen just because of the law of averages and what talent does in the playoff. And so that's what those respective arguments would sound like. And it would be bitter and it would be inconclusive at the end of the day.